Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach.
I'm Holly DeShane. I am Brandon's co-host and producer for this podcast.
So today we're a special edition. We're in beautiful Oceanside, California for the Oceanside 70.3 for Ironman. And so the race is tomorrow. This is always kind of like the breakout race of the year. Everybody kind of gets going, and so we're kind of excited to see how that turns out. It's a beautiful run course along the beach. So that's what it's known for. Today, we're going to get into this idea of permission to be weird. And this is really about really owning your authenticity and stepping outside the box, coloring outside the lines, things like that, because those are the big separators that you need to be able to stand out in different ways. And a lot of our programming kind of keeps us in these boxes. We really care about what other people think because of that. It's about dismantling that stuff and kind of waking up who you really are. So excited to get into this topic.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. It goes along with some stuff I've been listening to recently having to do with perception shifting and permission that comes through context and perception shift. So let's talk about, well, let me rephrase that. If we were to think about somebody, right, and you're giving them this permission to like be weird or be their authentic self, what are some of the contexts that you might think about putting or like helping them see or realize so that it felt safer?
It's basically this idea that we only like conform because that's what's safe, right? We shut down a lot of our expression. We feel like we have to be a certain way. And that obviously always goes back to childhood and needing that acceptance and to be a good kid. When you're really like trying to discover yourself, it is about putting yourself out there in these new ways. The internal feedback we generally get is going to be that it's not safe, or I shouldn't do that because people will judge me, or I'll be misunderstood. And so that kind of plays that. I think we all just want to be understood, but the further along you get, it's about being okay being misunderstood, not trying to earn the understanding. The context of it is simply like you probably have some desires that you shut down because you're afraid people will judge you. So as somebody that's gone against the grain much of my life, it's an uncomfortable place to be. And this is like kind of one of the toughest things to master is not fearing the opinions of others. Because some of us might have had those experiences where, yeah, when I go to do the things I want to do, I might have got a lot of negative feedback, or that might have been shut down or not allowed. The thing is like when we're suppressing all these things, now, if we do that for too long, now the resistance keeps building to like, okay, I just have to play it safe. I just have to do the normal thing. And as kids, we're always testing those boundaries, trying to push up against it. But generally there's this point where we kind of see it's not worth it anymore. You came here to be you, and it's a difficult journey back to that oftentimes. And that's even if you had really supportive parents or people that nurtured your gifts. There's generally a lot of those hangups of like trying to be accepted by others. We're always just trying to open that up, because you're going to be your happiest, you're going to be connected to joy when you're like naturally you. There's just a lot of things that get built up that block that for you. What we're trying to do is just open that up, and that's actually the full owning of my gifts and my individuality and like those things. That's what allows somebody to actually be great. So we respect like people that are different and can do that at a high level, but it's not an easy road. And I think that's why we appreciate it so much, is because I think inherently we know that all these societal structures, all the ways that most people operate, like that is what safety is as we grow into an adult, is I'm supposed to kind of align with these systems. And then we get that pushback if we do something different. And the thing is that pushback's generally coming from people that wish they would have done things differently, but they've settled into a life they're not happy with. And so it's knowing that it takes a lot of courage, but it's also this worthwhile path that I get to be at ease with myself. I get to finally relax the more I can own this and step into this. And so I get in tune with my own process. And I really just try to rediscover myself on so many levels. Like the religions and stuff like that, they talk about being childlike, being in touch with that part of you. And that's really what we're talking about, is the kid doesn't fear the judgments of others until they get the consequences, right? Until they're kind of like molded into, this is who you're supposed to be. So it's about waking that back up so that you can rediscover yourself and and give you this path forward where it is about following your curiosity and your interests and the things that excite you. And it's allowing yourself to go in those directions. And through that process, you do have to overcome the conditioning. Being weird is just simply being different. I'm going against the grain. I'm doing something different than what everybody else is doing. But everybody else is just kind of a carbon copy of each other if we're talking about what's normal. It's just really giving yourself that permission to explore yourself and open up in these new ways. And that's where all your gifts lie is your mind's unique. You have unique experiences, but we can't really fully access those if we're afraid to pursue that path.
So for our question for Brandon this week, and just as a reminder, anybody can submit a question at any time via any of the socials, or you could text Brandon or email the podcast, email Brandon, send a carrier pigeon, any of those things. Any of those things if you would like to ask a question. So along the lines of being weird, and you defined it a little bit, right, as breaking out of the mold, but I'm wondering if you have any stories or examples that from your own life, from a client's life, right, that sort of shows that breaking the mold actually leads to like an extraordinary life.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just like for somebody to be interesting, right? Like they have to be like different than everybody else, right? And I think that's kind of a main idea here is, if somebody just like talks about their job and, maybe their kids or whatever, but like when you do think outside the box and do things differently, that catches people's attention. I think most of my like career, that's what it's about, finding an obsession, like something that's like, oh, this is like worth me being different about. It's like finding like something worth being different about. And so looking back on my path, it's trying to pursue professional baseball when basically I had like no shot, right? And it was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to like pursue this because this is where my interest lies. This is like, I treated it as a lab where I was looking at the game differently than I think anybody else around me, where I was like, oh, this is going to help me like figure out my emotions and everything going on inside me. And that's going to be measured against my performance. Even going into like deep meditation for the periods I did. So it was just a couple year period where it was just like an obsession of like, I'm trying to rebuild myself from the inside out. No, people aren't really doing that. So people aren't really doing that. And there's a reason, because it's hard. It's like spending a lot of time alone, trying to sort yourself out. And, because all these like tracks are predefined. Like it's pretty clear. I go to college, I get the corporate job, I get the house, I get the family, like all that can be great. But is that you, or is that you just going with the flow of things? When you go against the grain, it's like you really have to get really clear on who you are and what you want. That's a difficult thing, like, because the world is your oyster. There's so many options. It's very difficult to decide that, but it's finding something that you can obsess about that would make you different. I looked at like growing up, I saw like most adults around me like looked like they were miserable and weren't happy. And so I was like, well, like, I don't want to end up like that. I decided I didn't want to end up like that. And so with that, it was like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, but like, I'm going to just go try and figure it out myself. It's about, looking for people that did things differently or did things exceptionally, but then it's also, you have to be in tune with yourself. And so that's following your interests. That's like, okay, what do I uniquely like? What do I uniquely see differently about other people? And the ability to go in all in on that. It takes a lot of courage. It's very tough. Like, it's isolating. You feel like nobody understands you. And once again, it's like, that's one of those things we have to conquer, because if I'm always looking to be understood, then I'm probably just going to follow that normal path. And so being weird is just really, what's the thing you're obsessed about, but you're like afraid to pursue, afraid to go all in on, because that's what's going to separate you from everybody else. Primitively, we all like want to belong to the group, right? We like, that's what safety is. I'm just like everybody else. And so now they can relate to me. And a lot of us like connect to other people based on what's going wrong in life. And so if I'm living a very different life than everybody else, then the conversations get kind of weird, and the longer I've like stuck with this, it's like more people are receptive to it. But definitely early on, I really struggled. I felt like nobody got what I was doing. And now people are starting to get to, because a lot of like the nervous system work and all that stuff is starting to be kind of trendy. People are starting to have a better grasp of it, but it was just like I was like early on a lot of this stuff. And so it was just like but that's where like my heart led me. That's where I felt like I had to go. And so I just kind of stuck with it and lasted it out until like it became a thing. When you're early on things, like that is one of the most difficult things, but that's if you look at extremely successful people, usually they're seeing something that nobody else is seeing before they see it, right? So it's like I was able to like dig in and get that work in. Now that it's like a hot topic, like I've already kind of like mastered a lot of those ideas. That ability to just kind of follow your interest in what fascinates you, like that is what it carries a different energy. Also, when you're not seeking other people's approval or trying to be understood all the time, now it's like I have to like sort that out on my own. And I do this all the time where I'm like, I don't know what to call myself. I don't know like how to describe exactly what I do, but with this podcast and other things, I just keep practicing and it keeps getting clearer and clearer, right? But so initially it sounds really weird, but then it's just like as you stick with it, now you're getting a better grasp on it yourself and you can speak from it more powerfully. So it's about being able to build confidence in the uncertainty periods. That's the biggest challenge for people is before anybody has their breakthrough, that's what it is. It's just like all this isolation, nobody gets me, nobody appreciates me, like all that stuff. But so you learn to like not need those things. That's the importance of like staying consistent with things and continuing to work through the rough time periods is because on the other side of it, you come out strong where like a lot of the things that you thought mattered, like don't matter at all anymore. And so now it's like you have this freedom to roam because especially with this work, when you see like the deeper layers of what judgment's really about and why people like project that onto you and like all that stuff, you're just like, oh well, like that's a person that was just afraid, that's a person that just has a lot of shame, that's a person that has a lot of resentment or regret. So does their words like carry that much weight anymore when I just know it's usually coming from a place of pain? That's the purpose of going through the hard times is you start to see the deeper layers of like, oh okay, this person just like wishes they would have done things differently. That's kind of the path. And that's why it's not for everybody and it's extremely difficult. I typically like, I don't recommend my path to anybody because like it was so isolating and hard. It's also like not on the other side of it now. Like I can speed up the process for people because I know what all the traps are. Like I can see like, oh yeah, you're just struggling with this. Like we just work on these adjustments and that allows you to continue to move forward. So it just like accelerates everything where, you don't have to live what I live to know what I know now. So that's kind of the beauty of all this is like being weird and different it doesn't even like feel that way anymore. It just like feels like me.
Yeah, the authenticity thing, I think there's a couple things. I'm going to come back to the authenticity thing. One, yes, I think it's kind of cool that the nervous system stuff is starting to make more of the mainstream now than it used to. There's a lot more of a light shown on that and the benefits of doing that work. So I think that's awesome. But I also think authenticity is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And I think like a lot of different sayings and kind of terminology words that people use, it can feel a little throwaway. Like oh yeah, I know what it is to be authentic. When really I think it's more difficult than that. I think it's easy for people to say they're authentic without fully understanding what it feels like to be authentic.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those words that people use a little bit too much. And usually it's like being said by people that I don't think know themselves well enough to know what it actually is. And so that's the key piece is like a lot of times, somebody, and I'm not saying be weird for the sake of being weird. I'm saying like naturally you'll be different if you just kind of like follow that path. A lot of people, they separate themselves, but then they also kind of niche out into their own little groups again, right? Where it's just like, oh, like we're this like group that's like different, but then they're all like the same person still. It's just like a different extension of it. I don't like this one, so I'm going to join this group, but you're still like joining your group. Like you're still not really getting to know yourself at a deep level because, even in those groups, there is that self-sacrifice going on. They're still like, oh, I'm conforming to what we do as a group. And because I'm still afraid to go off on my own. Authenticity, it's really like It's this idea you like stop trying and you just like be you. And that takes like a massive amount of work. It's because we all have this conditioning. We all have these drives to be accepted, to gain approval from others, to be loved, like all that stuff. A lot of times when people separate out and are trying to be different, that's that's the key word, is they're trying. There's effort that's being put into being different rather than just kind of settling into yourself and being from that place. And so with that, it's, there's no desperate energy. I'm not like pushing against status quo. I'm just more of just like, I'm just aligning with what I want. And that's an individual process. We all have unique desires. We all have a unique way of seeing things. And if I can fully own that, it's more of like, I'm not pushing against anything. I'm just aligning with what I want. The authenticity thing is a tough one because people kind of just see it as like, oh, I'm going to like be different, but then now I'm like judgmental and pushing against everything else. And to some extent, I'm saying like, when I say like the societal norms, there was a point where I was like pushing against all that, right? And I think that's part of the process is like, first you're separating from that, but now it's just like, it's like more of just an acceptance of like, oh, these are the systems, and you get to pick and choose whether you want to participate on that level or not. But it's no longer like resenting or pushing against that anymore. It's just more of, yeah, this is what I prefer to do. And when you're in a system, you kind of have to work within it to some degree. You have to make money and pay taxes and like all that stuff. You have to survive, but it's like, it's this ability to have a flexible mind to be like, okay, like how can I maintain my actual authenticity while existing within these things that aren't perfect? And there is no perfect system. And wanting there to be one is kind of a flawed thinking, because the systems are designed for the larger population, right? Like normal is normal for a reason. So if you want to be exceptional, it is actually about paving your own path, separating out from that, but it's not pushing against that. It's just bringing your unique perspective to things. And so that's the thing, is authenticity. If you're trying to do something, that means you're still acting from a wound. When you're fully present and you're usually, your mind isn't really worried about other things. You're just doing what you naturally do. And that's what we're trying to align with is what feels natural to you, what feels easy, what feel, because anytime you're having self-doubt or overthinking and that kind of stuff, like you're plugged into strategy to try and avoid pain. And we're trying to exit that system, being like, oh, like this person being upset at me, is that actually the end of the world? When we're a kid, it might have been, right? Like that might have actually done a lot of damage, where we really needed to gain that love and acceptance from somebody. And that's where we come up with performance a lot of times. The performance strategy is it's a strategy to try and get love and approval. We might be far down on that path, and that might not be fulfilling for us. That might not feel very good. But it's like, that's all part of the process, though. When you put time and energy into things, you start developing skills, but it's like, it's the unique expression of those skills that I think is fulfilling for us. You don't just throw away the life you've lived. It's how can I use my experiences as leverage and basically put my own spin on stuff. In the coaching world, this is a big thing. People do like certifications and stuff, and even therapists. Okay, they have their path through like university. That's all like foundational stuff. But what separates you from somebody else is your unique perspective, like how you see things, how you apply things. That's all the being weird thing, right? Where I see this way different than I've been trained to see it. How can I bring this unique perspective to the marketplace in a unique way, right? It's more of that line of thinking of like, all the foundational stuff's good, but if you're a carbon copy of everybody else, like that's what's normal. That's average. If we want to go beyond that, we have to think about these other ideas of how do I apply creativity to the process? Because my mind is going to think differently than everybody else because I have a different past. So it's about leveraging your past to create something new and different and improved. That's about settling into yourself and really owning your perspective and putting that forth into the world. When you do that, if it's not something that's normal, that is going to get pushed back. But if we let that stop us, now we basically fall back in line. It's more about this ability to continue to work through those things that we have to conquer, which is like the self-consciousness, insecurities, opinions of others, all those types of things. that's a brutal path. It's very difficult. And once again, that's why we appreciate people that do that well, is because I think on some level there's the awareness of like this person really had to separate, but now that they're on the other side of it, we can kind of see the power of it. It's really what they've gained in that process is this like sense of self. Okay. And that sense of self is we're allowing ourselves to access the full expression of us because we've surrendered these ideas that I need to protect myself from judgment. So that's like the key is the stronger I get in myself, the less I care about what other people are saying. We don't have to do that with the chip on the shoulder. We could, like I said, the pushing against is still me hanging on to that wound. When I heal that wound, I can just align with what I want, and I'm kind of blazing my own trail, but it's a natural thing that we're doing.
Let's go through giving up that resistance a little bit more, because there are people who build a life around like fighting back, right? Or rebelling against their parents or being the opposite of, right? And that's like more of a resistance thing than what you're talking about. So let's do a little bit more about if you're feeling that resistance and it is in this rebellious feeling or moving in the opposite direction, angry kind of thing. Let's talk about giving that up and like why that's going to be more authentic.
Well, yeah, so that's stage one. I don't like this, so I'm going to go this direction. And I'm pushing against this because I didn't like it, because it was probably forced on me. And my question there is like, okay, operating that way, are you happy? Right? Because usually when I do that, I'm just focused on pushing against this and everything that's wrong with this, right? And so that's where our mood is an important indicator of like, well, do we really need to fixate so much on what you don't like, or do we just continue to align with what you want? I think a lot of people get caught, initially when you separate, that's going to be the nature of that is you're going to use this as kind of the thing to drive you forward. But that always leads to, me not being happy and and me being judgmental. And like everything about this, we judge those people harshly and we talk shit about it and like all, but it's just like, what does that do? I'm still not, I still didn't get what I really want. Okay. That still like is making me miserable. So it's cleaning it up from that step. It's just like, okay, I'm over here. I've separated out, but it's about surrendering the judgment of the other side. It's about like, okay, that's okay for them. This is what I prefer. We operate out of preferences. And, when you're on a growth process, there is usually judgment of like who you used to be or who people are, like where you used to be, that kind of thing. And that all that stuff's, it's a losing game because my attention's still on the shame of that time. So it's about moving through that, making peace with it. Everything we teach here is about to make peace with your past, okay? Because if I'm still focused, even if I'm very different, there's still part of me that's bound to and attached to the thing I'm pushing against. And that's, I feel like I'm fighting every step of the way. And what we're trying to do is surrender the fight. As long as I'm fighting against something, there's always going to be something to match that. Okay. And that's why that way of being brings a lot of stress and it doesn't make us very happy, is because every step of the way, we feel like it's a battle. As we surrender the battle, now we start to see that, it's kind of like the hero's journey and like those types of things where we need like the adversary to start off with, because we're still very externally focused. So I need those things to push against, but there's a point where I start to see it as like dumb. Why am I even fighting this anymore? It's not even, I don't have to, right? I can just like make the shift and align over here and I can just keep moving forward. And so that's if we're stuck in the battle mode forever, that's what burns us out. That's what's exhausting. Once again, that's what makes us miserable, is we feel like life is hard. We feel like life is a struggle. And what we're trying to talk about is aligning with what's true to you, where you can naturally attract things that are going to support you. And that's about bringing this like calm, peaceful, embodied energy. If I have the chip on my shoulder, okay, there's anger behind that and people can sense that. And let's say when you're talking about like, who do you want to do business with and things like that, is it somebody that's like angry and has to fight all the time? Or is it somebody that's like really confident in themselves and calm and relaxed and just is really in their skill set? That person's not pushing against anything. They're just in this place of trying to master themselves. And that's what really makes somebody special, is when you're in tune with yourself, not pushing against what you don't like. Okay. Because if my attention's over here, I still have this split attention where I can't fully move forward because I feel like I still need to protect myself from all these things over here. And so it's generally an illusion. It's generally things we've created in our head. And at one point they may have been true, but most of the time they're not true anymore. And as you get in, further into adulthood, you start to realize like most people are pretty fixated on themselves. They don't actually like care much about other people. So it's just like the things I think I'm fighting usually like aren't there anymore. Right. But we get so used to it that we like cling on to that. So it starts to form this expectation that like every step of the way, I'm going to have to fight these battles, but that's just because I'm used to them. Right. So part of me is like always watching out for it. And so that's why we do the deeper healing work, is because at some point these things were probably very true and you did need to kind of build this armor. But as you get further along, it's about surrendering the armor so that you can really just fully embody things. Because if part of my attention is worried about protecting myself all the time, that's basically stealing the energy I need to continue moving forward in this other direction. And when we're fully aligned with things, you can really see that because there's a presence to it. There's an ease to that. We see that commonly with athletes. Somebody that's like put a ton of work in and then they go perform, it generally looks effortless because they just have this mountain of like self-belief within themselves that they're not worried about what anyone else is doing. And what's interesting is I think mindset wise, we're really starting to see this shift. We went to the pro panel today for the Ironman, and it was the top pros that are racing. And pretty much every single one of their mindsets now is really focused on their internal process. You're not seeing much of the competitive mindset anymore. I think that's on its way out of like, oh, I need to like conquer this other person. It's more about like, no, I'm going to put my best effort forward and I'm going to see where the things land. That's a big shift going on too now, is people see that me fixating and pushing against things actually burns up a lot of energy. So the cleanest mindset is just you really focused on your process, you being in that process. And usually you're obsessed with something and you're trying to continually refine it and master it. And everything in your life is feedback to that. You're always given more steps, every experience you have, it's showing you what you still need to work on. That's all an internal process. So that's where things are heading, is I think more and more athletes are starting to see that of, I'm not actually like worried about this other person anymore. But a lot of times our drives when we're younger is built on that. And so it's just knowing that there's a point where that has an expiration date. There's a point where that stops being useful. And it eventually has to really just transform into this internal approach. And that's where you really get into self-mastery. And that's where you really get into being unique and different and just fully owning it, as you really start to put blinders on about everything else going on around you. That may appear weird to people, but it's just because there's so much like strength behind it. And there's so much like, like how do they even do that? Because most people are terrified to go on that path. It's the shift from the external, I need to fight something, to wait, I'm actually just trying to conquer myself. And conquering yourself just means healing your wounds that are blocking you from the full realization of yourself.
Would you call that the second phase, or have we moved past second into further down the road?
I think we're further down because, and that's things, these progressions, it's not an all at once thing. You're not like, because there's still remnants of that. I even have some of that where there's things that trigger me or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I got to push against that. But then pretty quickly I'll snap back into like, oh, that's a waste of time. Like I just need to get back into my process. So these are like gradual shifts that happen over time. But the thing is you'll see a lot of people that stay in that initial phase the entirety of their career or their life. And everything's just a battle from beginning to end. There should be a point where it doesn't really feel like a battle anymore. And that means you're evolving beyond the external stuff and you're more in this internal process. And so those are gradual shifts that happen over time. But step 2 would be like, you're going to be split. You're going to be kind of 50-50. Like half the time I'm oriented external, half the time I'm on this internal process. And all we're trying to do is get more and more internal over time. That's where you're functioning pretty much all the time, is this internal motivation. And that's why we always talk about being in tune with what you feel, because those are the parts of yourself that you need to resolve to continue on your journey. And so it really is about coming to peace with yourself and just really owning your skill sets and what you came here to do. That's this gradual process of like orienting myself internally rather than externally. A big part of my day is like half of my attention split. It's like, okay, what's going on externally? And then how do I feel about that? It's moment to moment feedback. And if something still sticks to me, then I go work on it immediately. But because that's the way I'm actually going to get better, I'm not going to get better by trying to compete with somebody else.
All right. So when you told me about this topic a little earlier today, I had a thought about this story that I'm going to share. And this is more about, there's the part about being weird that's, you trusting yourself and finding authenticity and all of this. But then there's this, this story will make sense in a second. Then there's a thing about like allowing the space for other people to show up authentically. So we've mentioned this before. My husband Aaron and I have an endurance team that we run more or less. And recently we had a team event with a member who we were going to like a swim thing. And she said that she was so nervous to come to like the first few events that we had. And her thought was, I wonder how long it will be before I can be weird. And I was like, well, immediately, like this shouldn't be a thing that you worry about. But let's just talk about that kind of thing too, right? Where I feel like I have to hold it all in. And how do we create spaces also that allow for authenticity in other people?
And that's the thing. It's about the more you embody it, the more you give other people permission to. And that's with this, we're talking about working through your wounds so you can surrender judgment. And because that judgment is what stops people from being themselves, right? They feel the tension, they feel they're being judged. If we just look at the basics of life, generally the best friends that we have or partners is just the people we feel like we can be ourselves with, right? Where we're not on guard, there's no edge to it. I can just be myself and I can surrender the mask. Okay. So most of public life is putting on a mask. It's being able to exist in these different systems and align with them. That's why a lot of people are exhausted at the end of the day, is because it takes conscious work to try and put forth this image. Many of us grew up with households where there's like the public version and then the private version. And we're two very different things. And so we're always the ego is about managing your public image. Okay. So this is what I present. This is how I want people to see me. We're always altering ourselves to maintain that. It's this idea that, okay, the more I surrender the mask, the more I let go of the shame of being different, the more I'm just comfortable in my own skin. People sense that around me. Now they can start to show those parts of themselves. If somebody was like, grew up in a very judgmental household, where everything they did was judged harshly, that's going to be pretty intense, right? Like, because the whole environment's built on tension of like, what do I need to do to stay safe? It is about the more I accept myself, the more I surrender into myself, I'm starting to create that space outward where people can kind of pick up on that of like, oh, I don't have to filter myself as much. I can speak freely here. I am accepted. But it always just starts with you. It always just starts with, okay, the more I surrender my judgments, the more at ease I'm going to be with myself, and people are going to pick up on that. And that's it's an individual process. And if somebody's really uptight and bound up and over analytical, they're going to have a very hard time opening up. And I would argue there's probably a very small fraction of them where they're actually themselves. It's about getting out of our head, getting into our body. It's ease, it's relaxation, it's surrendering the harsh judgments. It's very difficult to find big groups that operate that way because, you can usually create that in smaller groups. But yeah, like the more people you add, the more there's different dynamics involved where people might present one thing, but then they're actually quite the opposite. And you'll notice that a lot of people, the people I just saw a reel on this, like the people that say they're nice all the time are usually like the meanest people, right? The people that say they're really confident are usually the most insecure. You kind of look for the context of things. Is this person like comfortable in their own skin? Are they always like trying to protect themselves, play small, shut down? Well, that's just means that they're in their head. They're always trying to strategize like how they need to stay safe, right? So there's no like great way to create a group atmosphere because people might be drawn to those things that might actually not be that authentic too. It's tough to filter for, but it's like the way we control it is we just keep doing our own work, and we start experiencing, the more I surrender judgment within myself, the more I start to offer that to other people, and then they feel safer around me. I think that's why a lot of people like to like go to like personal development conferences and things like that, is like, oh, I have this weekend where I can just go be myself and be free because everybody's with a similar mindset. But then that's like nowhere else in their life. And so you create more of that by it not just being an occasional thing of like, this is a place I can go and be safe, but it's just like, how can I create that more throughout my life so that I don't feel like I have to hide myself as much?
Do you think on the like personal development retreats or things that it's not just that there'll be people there of a similar mindset, but oftentimes they go and they don't know anyone else? What I'm getting at is it easier to be authentic with people who don't know you in any other context?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's the big thing. People, I think a lot of people travel that way too, right? Where I'm like, I can just go to this place and I can like be just me, and like nobody's going to judge me for that because they don't know any different. It's the people that we're around the most that we feel the most judged by, and that's by nature because they have so many experiences with us that they've formed expectations of who we are, and that might feel limiting. We might feel like we're being put in a box because I've been this way for so long and I've interacted with this person for so long. So yeah, definitely with strangers, I think people have an easier time with it because there's no expectations being placed on them. But that's the thing, is like when people are kind of running away from that, well, you haven't created that at home. You haven't created that environment in your day-to-day life. So it's like you're trying to escape from this prison to go over here. But why not like build a bridge to create more and more of that in your life? So yeah, I think it should be a daily process of like finding new insights into yourself and figuring out things like you want to adjust or make better. That's really, that all comes pretty naturally when you heal your past, as you start to shift your identity where you're less attached to things. It's more of like, who do I feel like I can't be myself around? Okay, and then we look at why do I feel that way around them? And generally that's going to mirror back things from our childhood. So the more we heal that and clean that up, our relationships, our day-to-day relationships actually start to shift too, where we experience people differently because I'm no longer holding on to those protections. We've been working together a few years, right? So it's just, have you noticed your interactions with people shifting over that timeline of like, the more you've like healed yourself and shifted out of it, you just like experience people differently at this point, right? Yeah.
That's all true. In a way that sometimes is like a little trippy, a little like, oh, I didn't think I'd feel this way about that person or experience them in that way.
It's all expectations. So we get what we expect. And so oftentimes, you'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, oh, this person, this, and they'll give you a whole story about why it's a terrible person or whatever. And then I'll go meet them and I'll be like, oh, they're perfectly fine, because that's not my experience. I'm very mindful of that, of like, we all have our own individual experience running around in our head, and it's based on how we process and internalize information. And so if I'm not wounded in the same way as this other person that's experiencing that, like, I'm going to get a totally different version of that person, right? It's super trippy, but that's the thing, is like, as you clean up your past, things naturally shift where you just get the better part of most people, right? There's less and less problems. There's less and less you feel like you need to protect yourself from in traveling with it. Like, a lot of people will like, oh, like, don't go to that city. There's a bunch of crime and it's terrible and this and that. And I always have the best time in those cities, right? I'm like, oh, I felt safe the whole time. There's no problem. But that's just like, a lot of those blocks are gone for me, where I just trust myself to be able to navigate situations in a clean way, where other people are projecting fear into stuff constantly, and then that's affecting their experience. So yeah, it's super trippy stuff, but it's happened like thousands of times at this point. That's your story, it's not mine.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I have that experience with someone at work that I really work decently well with, and other people struggle.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you bring your energy to the table, right?
Yeah.
So it's whatever I'm offering, that's what the person's responding to. Say, if somebody's got some stuff going on, if they get these triggers, they're getting those activated when they're interacting with that person, and it affects that relationship. So if I don't have those same problems, I'm going to be seeing it differently. That's we are all different. That's why we want to approach situations with curiosity. We want to give people a shot because those judgments from other people might be highly inaccurate. It might just be a part of them that they're not willing to address.
So you've lived a pretty authentic life. In the beginning, you talked about you realizing the adults around you weren't very happy, and that led you to pursuing a different way of living. One that's super perceptive of a small child, to have that and then hang on to that. Are there any other things that you think of that kind of stood out that like drove you into like your more unique, authentic life?
Yeah, I think I just like had a big problem with like harsh judgment. People having to comment about everything or put labels on stuff immediately. It was almost like decisions were already made and there's no point in looking further into it. And that like never really sat well with me. Yeah, well, so going off of people that aren't very happy and are judgmental, that doesn't seem right. But then also that there wasn't this curiosity to learn more. There wasn't this ability to see differently. And then also, just a lot of things didn't make sense to me. I was like, I don't understand why you do it that way. That seems totally off base. And it was just like,
Are there two of them?
where it's just like I didn't see alignments with people. People would say one thing and do something different. Like dots wouldn't connect there, and I'm just like, so I I think like it was really easy for me to lose respect for people in that process of like you're not happy, number one, but two, like none of this makes sense. It just kind of seemed all wrong to me, and that was the big struggle. I have to like exist this way for now, but I never. It was just like the normal things never appealed to me. I was just like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. And every time I would see people make a decision to like settle into something more normal, you'd kind of see a little bit of the light go out, right? You start to see them like kind of hang their shoulders a little more. They would show up differently. They wouldn't speak with as much energy, like all that kind of stuff. And that was the thing is it's like you go through this gauntlet, but it's like it can break you. But if you keep going it and you see it these ways, it does make you stronger every time. I don't know why I was able to like hang on to that, but it just like it was like having to put up with things that I thought were dumb and didn't make sense, that I'm just like, I can't live my life this way. So I'm gonna like create my own things. I'm gonna like figure that out no matter how hard it is. I'm going to stick with that because I know it'll be worth it. I think that's a pretty weird thing that most people don't operate that way. I was willing to suffer. That was the main thing is like, I don't care how hard this is. Like, I'm going to get through to the other side. And that was just like one thing I clung on to. It's more of this, anytime I would make decisions based on the expectations of others and that kind of like, it just never felt good to me. Like it always felt off. I was like always highly sensitive. So it would just, it would really like shut down my system. I would feel terrible for weeks on end. I always had to clean things up. I always had to look deeper. I always had to understand it more. It just started to be very obvious that most people don't want to go there. Most people don't want to look any deeper. Most people just want to settle into their lanes. But it shows in their energy. It shows in how they interact with people. It shows in their judgment. It shows in their mood. That was just like something I could never settle for.
If we were gonna leave folks listening with your final thoughts or takeaways for permission to be weird, what would they be?
I would say, just find something within you that you're really willing to go to bat for, that I can't lose this part of myself, because the world will break that in you if you let it. But you really have to zone into what really matters for you, what separates you, like how you see things differently. And initially it is really fighting for those things. And the longer you fight for them, then you start to realize like, oh, I actually don't have to fight anybody anymore. The battles are over. And then that's where we transition into just kind of surrendering the battle and aligning with what you want. It's all part of the process. Like that's all designed to strengthen you. We kind of see it as steps. We see it as phases, and we don't want to get stuck in any one phase forever, because you're continually evolving and changing. But I would say if your approach is really making you angry, miserable, resentful, any of those things, like you probably need some deeper work. In that deeper work that you're actually going to enhance your gifts. You're going to bring new energy to the table when you heal those wounds and clean it up, right? And so this is all about cleaning up your energy, because everything that's negative that we hold within us, that creates that tension and stress. And now I feel like I need to protect myself and guard myself, and then my life starts to shrink. So if I'm going to build a bigger life, last week we had thinking bigger, but now it's like I need this ability to step out, kind of maybe out on my own. I might have to be on my own for a while. I might have to isolate. But that's where you build yourself, is you really have to sort these things out and come to terms with them in a way in a way that makes you feel good. And it is based on how you feel. You get that feedback all the time. If you're miserable and depressed, okay, we need some mental emotional adjustments. We need to find out what you believe about life that's creating those feelings for you. And how can I expand my mind? I need to depersonalize the things that have happened to me so that I can see this path forward that leads me to a brighter future. It's going to be about owning your unique perspective, and your perspective should be evolving over time. Like, you shouldn't see things the same way now as you did 10 years ago or 10 years from now. That should always change. And so that's that flexibility of, I'm never finished. I'm always a work in progress. I'm always evolving. And that's surrendering the ego. It's letting go of these ideas that you had that might be building a box around your life. Our judgments of situations, we might see closed doors where if I just look at it differently, I might see a whole lane I can walk down. We want to humble ourselves and consider that maybe some of my judgments are wrong. Maybe they're off base. Maybe they were just built on a lot of pain. And as long as I'm holding on to that pain, I can't really fully own who I am, because there's this aspect to me that's locked up. So it's about freeing yourself. And you do that by forgiving and letting go of the pain. No matter how hard it is, there is ways to let these things go. And it's a bit of a process sometimes, and have some self-compassion for yourself too. Because, we've all been through things, some of us pretty extreme, challenging things. You want to be easy with yourself. You want to be forgiving with yourself. And that's what allows you to move forward. But when we go through pain, that's actually our teacher. That's where we learn all the lessons. And that really enhances who you are in so many ways. So you build that strength and courage along the way. I encourage you to start that journey.
You want to share best places for people to find you if they're curious about reaching out for the work that you do, or any other cool call outs, stuff you got coming up?
Yeah, so if you're curious about this work, you can schedule a free 30-minute strategy session on my website, brandonthielk.com. So I just get to know you a little bit and share how I can help. I might see where you're blocked and kind of paint that path forward for you. If you want to register for my newsletter, it comes out every Monday, the Lightning Report. That's also on my website. That gives updates on the business and some insights for the week. If you want to follow along on YouTube and Instagram at Brandon Thielk, and TikTok at bthielk, we post out there pretty regularly. So next week I'll be doing the cycling house again and getting back on the bike. So excited for that. Get to meet some new people. But yeah, just be on the lookout for things. We'll probably be putting together some group stuff here soon. So just keep an eye out for that. And thanks for listening.
Talk to you later.